Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the National March for Life YouTube channel. Thanks for tuning in. Tonight, as we continue with our Life on Film series leading up to next year's National March for Life in Ottawa. My name is Matt Wojciechowski.
And I'm Josie Lubke.
And we are members of the organizing committee for the March for Life here at Campaign Life Coalition.
And tonight we have a special presentation for you. I Am Standing for Life, which is a roundtable discussion we filmed earlier this year. It premiered a week ahead of the 2022 National March for Life. It's a panel featuring myself, Alex Schattenberg of the Euthanasia Prevention Coalition, Angelina Ireland of the Delta Hospice Society, and Sister Antoniana of the Sisters of Life. And we talk about life issues like euthanasia and abortion that are currently affecting Canada. And I think this discussion is really pertinent right now, given the overturning of Roe v. Wade south of the border, and also the potential expansion of euthanasia here in Canada. Next year, euthanasia is supposed to be expanded to those who are suffering from mental illness alone. And there's also talk about euthanizing or killing infants who suffer from illness or disability.
Yeah, so it's getting pretty bad, and that's why I think this program will be very beneficial to all of you tuning in tonight. So enjoy the discussion, and please feel free to send your comments or write down your comments in the live chat. Share this video with family and friends, even for those of you who weren't able to watch it tonight. It's going to remain on our YouTube channel indefinitely. So enjoy the conversation, and we'll see you after the show.
The government came to us and they said, "You have to start killing your patients." And we refused. So they all came against us.
This is really about causing the death of somebody at a vulnerable time of their life. That's what euthanasia is about. You know, taking advantage of the fact and abandoning them by killing them.
Ultimately, as pro-lifers, we believe that all human beings are equal, so a preborn child matters as much as a born child. So we would never say that it's okay to kill an innocent human being after birth because of suffering, and so likewise, we shouldn't say it's okay to kill a preborn child because of suffering.
Every beat of their heart is God saying, "I love you, I love you, I love you." And it's the fact that we exist gives us our dignity, not for what we can do, what we have, or anything like that. It's the fact that we are alive.
That is never what the hospice movement was set out to be. It was a place where you did not come to die. It was a place where you came to live to the fullest. So, that's the tragedy of what these laws do.
You don't have to earn your value or earn legal protection. You should just receive that same respect. You should receive human rights because of who and what you are, which is a human being. And then as Christians, we have all of that dignity and because of our Creator.
So many women have this veil over their hearts and their minds after they've had an abortion that they have committed the unforgivable sin. But that's completely a lie, and that's a false truth that the devil wants them to believe.
We've abandoned you to death, and on top of it, there's certain classes of people who obviously fall into that category far easier than others. And so we've created a situation of human inequality rather than human equality. We've taken away the dignity of a human person because we said it's okay to kill you.
We have not surrendered, and we end up being part of the greatest human rights movement of all time.
Hello everyone, my name is Kevin Dunn, filmmaker and pro-life speaker. I'm pleased to be moderating this panel discussion. I Am Standing for Life, National Pro-Life Roundtable, a presentation of the National March for Life. Before we introduce our panelists, we would like to thank our key sponsors for this evening, Niagara Region Right to Life, Campaign Life Coalition, and the Knights of Columbus. And speaking of the Knights, here's a special greeting from Ontario State Deputy Marcel Lemon.
Hello, my name is Marcel Lemon, and I'm the State Deputy of the Knights of Columbus for the Province of Ontario. And I'm pleased to welcome you to the I Am Standing for Life National Roundtable Discussion. The Knights of Columbus in Ontario have been supporters and organizers of the National March for Life in Ottawa for many years, and we support pro-life causes from conception to natural death. And so we're very pleased to be sponsoring this National Pro-Life Roundtable, and I wish you a fruitful and productive discussion.
Tonight we're going to tackle the two key social justice issues of our time, abortion and euthanasia. The destruction of life, which now threatens life at all stages here in Canada. Before we bring on our panelists, here are some key things you need to know about both of these issues. Euthanasia was legalized in 2016 under Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Since then, doctors have euthanized over 21,500 patients in Canada under the misleading euphemism medical aid in dying. In just a few short years already, some of the scant safeguards have been dropped. Now anyone with a grievous and irremediable medical condition is eligible to be euthanized regardless of whether they're dying or not. If their death is reasonably foreseeable, they can be killed the very day they make such a request, even though one's will to live fluctuates significantly over short time spans. Otherwise, a patient need only wait 3 months before the state will take their life. Our medical professionals and institutions, including the Delta Hospice Society in British Columbia, are being increasingly pressured to participate in euthanasia. There is very little conscience protection, nor protection for patients who want reassurance that even at their most vulnerable, they won't have to worry about being pressured into making this request. Even funeral homes are getting in on the game and offering to kill people on their premises. Abortion was decriminalized in Canada in 1969 under Prime Minister Pierre Elliott Trudeau. It was originally permitted for the life and health of the mother, which was broadly interpreted. In 1988, the Supreme Court struck down the law on abortion, considering it unconstitutional due to unequal access to the procedure. They tasked Parliament with creating a new law, but the attempt at one, Bill C-43, satisfied neither the pro-abortion lobby nor the pro-life movement. It failed in a tie vote in the Senate. Since then, we have been without any legal protection for the preborn in Canada. That means that a woman can have an abortion at any time during pregnancy for any reason whatsoever, even for something as trivial as the baby's sex or a cleft palate. She can have as many abortions as she wants, and they'll all be taxpayer funded. There is no democratic country in the world as unrestricted as Canada when it comes to abortion. Since 1969, over 4 million innocent human beings have been killed in our nation. Every year, 100,000 more lives are added to the total. That's almost 300 lives every day. The pro-life movement's ability to oppose this genocide is also being impeded. The majority of provinces now have bubble zones in which any form of pro-life protest is banned. The federal government's latest threat is to strip crisis pregnancy centers and other pro-life charities of their charitable status. They wish to make it easier for women to choose to kill their babies and harder for them to choose life. As our country continues to spiral out of control on these fundamental life issues, we have a number of champions who, day in and day out, proclaim life as something to be cherished, protected, and defended. Our panel today, Sister Antoniana Maria, Sisters of Life; Alex Schattenberg, International Chair of the Euthanasia Prevention Coalition; Josie Ludke, Co-Youth Coordinator, Campaign Life Coalition; and joining us from Delta, British Columbia, Angelina Ireland, President of the Delta Hospice Society. So let's dive in with our panelists and discuss our first topic tonight, which is My Body, My Choice. We'll start at the other end of the spectrum, which is, of course, euthanasia. Alex, we'll maybe start with you, Executive Chair of the Euthanasia Prevention Coalition. You must deal with this argument every day. What is your response?
Well, actually, people consider euthanasia an issue of freedom, choice, autonomy, right? My body, my choice. I can do what I want. Don't stand in my way. And it's you know, legally speaking, philosophically speaking, it's a lie. It's like I say, the flag that's waved by the the pro-euthanasia people. And the reason is quite simple. In the case of euthanasia or even assisted suicide, it's someone else who's actually doing the act. So someone might request it, and there's lots of reasons people might be so emotionally down or psychologically down that they might request an end to their life. But what they're actually doing is the law is giving the right to the physician or nurse practitioner to go ahead and cause your death. So when someone else lethally injects you, I don't know how the my body, my choice philosophically fits, other than it's a good, how would you say, banner to wave to make people feel comfortable with the idea. This is really about causing the death of somebody at a vulnerable time of their life. That's what euthanasia is about. You know, taking advantage of the fact and abandoning them by killing them.
Angelina, you've stayed the course on everything that you stand for at the Delta Hospice Society, and you must deal with this my body, my choice argument all the time. Why are you not allowing this in your hospice setting? What is your response?
You know, we're just fighting for the right to exist. You know, we are fighting for authentic palliative care in Canada, which is a national treasure and a gift to humanity. So I am just asking for the right to exist, to live in peace, to be able to have sanctuary in our last days. You know, I came to this whole fight as a cancer patient myself. Thanks be to God, I now am well, but I am just asking for the right to exist and the right to have peace, and for those of my colleagues in their last days.
And do your clients, do your patients at the hospice, do they feel the same way? You know, or is this just a single person's fight?
Well, you know, when we had our hospice, before it was taken from us, you know, the vast majority of people want access to authentic palliative care in this country. There's just a minority who, you know, honestly want to be euthanized and want to be executed. So no, it's a small minority which is trying to take over what the majority actually want to experience in their final days.
Alex, do you want to comment on that?
Well, I'd like to put it in perspective of a recent story. We had a woman contact us, and what happened is she has cancer, she's become blind, she's got very bad arthritis, and she was approved for euthanasia. So she's been approved, and so she said that Dying with Dignity people, they were wanting to carry out this death because she was approved, and with her cancer they said, oh, you can have it immediately, you don't have to wait, there's no need for a waiting period. And she's felt that, oh, maybe she was being pushed towards, you know, being killed rather than it being her choice at all. But I'll go one step further. She ended up talking to somebody who actually is a supporter of our group, who told her, well, you got to contact us. So she contacted us, and after speaking to her, what were her real issues? Well, because she's blind and she has really bad arthritis, etc., she can't go out shopping anymore. She can't wash her clothes anymore. She can't do these basic things in life anymore. And therefore, you know, what it was coming down to is she's saying, well, I want to live, I just can't live this way, you see? So they say, oh, it's about my body, my choice. No, it's about abandoning people to death who need someone who is willing to help them, who's willing to care for them. Because it's not easy when you have these, I can totally understand she's not going through an easy situation. Nonetheless, what she actually needs is people to support her so she can die naturally without having to worry about these basic needs in life, which she can't fulfill at this point herself.
You mentioned something there, which was, I hear a lot, is like, you said people who are in your side. Is it an us and them issue? Is it an us and them?
Well, not really, no, but philosophically there's a bit of that. The funny thing is as in the case of this lady, when I'm talking to her, she recognizes that her life is of value, that she values her life. And she also recognized that the Dying with Dignity people were pushing for what? Her death. She thought that, oh, now that she's been approved for euthanasia, they would help her live until she died, but they weren't interested in that. Now, they would call her up and she'd be talking to them about helping her with stuff, and they're like, what are you talking about? That's not what we do. We schedule your death. That's what we do. We're going to schedule your freedom. Well, it's not about freedom. This wasn't about freedom. She needed help with basic things. And so once you started, organizing that for her and saying, well, that's possible. No, that can be done. These things. No, and then she's saying, well, that's great because, I feel I have things left to do. You know, she is terminally ill. She will die. All that is true. But killing her, is that the answer? No, she needed proper care and support. That's what she needed.
I suppose the beginning of this whole my body, my choice argument, rationale, started with Roe v. Wade, started with the striking down of our law here in Canada in 1969. Josie, how do you respond to the my body, my choice argument, if you will, when it comes to the other end of life or the beginning of life, abortion?
Well, first of all, it's really important to establish scientifically there are two bodies at play here. There's the body of the mother, of course, but there's also the body of the preborn child, because that mother does not have 2 heads and 4 arms and 4 legs. There is a separate body whose rights must be taken into consideration. So I do want to acknowledge that the mother has a right to bodily autonomy, but does that right take precedence over all other rights? And the answer is no. And I can give an example. There was a drug called thalidomide that was once used to relieve morning sickness, but it would deform the child such that they wouldn't properly develop arms and legs, so they stopped using it. So does a woman have the right to take thalidomide knowing that it could deform her child? No, of course not. Even though she has this right to bodily autonomy, this child also has rights that need to be taken into consideration. And so if it's wrong to deform a child, certainly it would be wrong to deprive this child of a future altogether, as abortion does. So the right to life takes precedence before the right to bodily autonomy. Furthermore, parents have obligations to their children. They have responsibilities. So a parent who's charged with neglect because they decide to lie in bed all day rather than feed their toddler, they are not going to be able to use the excuse, my body, my choice, in front of a judge. The judge would laugh at them. So similarly with pregnancy, even though it's, I think, much more intimate, it's 9 months long, it can be very burdensome, but the parent still has an obligation to provide for the basic needs of that child, and certainly that parent can't kill that innocent human being. So my body, my choice is a very attractive slogan, but ultimately it doesn't fly when we're talking about pregnancy or any situation where a parent needs to care for his or her offspring.
Mm-hmm. Sister, I mean, let's talk about this practically. You pick up the phone every day or get an email or however you're contacted. This must play in to what you do on a regular basis in assisting women in crisis pregnancies. How does it play out? How are you able to lovingly speak about this, you know, in the way that Josie did, but maybe more from a kind of a personal level?
Mm-hmm, yeah. So as Sisters of Life, we have the privilege of really receiving women who are in a real crisis situation. And oftentimes, a pregnancy is an experience of a complete crisis for them. It's so the first thing that we do as sisters is we listen. And just to be able to listen to her fears, her dreams, her hopes, her shattered dreams, and then for her to be able to be received in love, and for us to reflect back to her strength, her goodness, her beauty. And when she can experience herself to be understood and loved, immediately her heart turns towards her child. So our experience is to love the mothers so the mothers can be good mothers to their children. And so that's, so the experience of my body, my choice, that sort of slogan kind of pales in comparison to the experience of a woman experiencing herself as beautiful, good, strong, believed in, and then immediately she knows she's pregnant. It's not a foreign concept to her. So just a quick example, a woman called us, she's a university student, and being pressured to have an abortion by her parents as well as the father of the baby. And we listened to her for about 2.5 hours. And after she experienced herself to be understood and known and believed in, she's like, I'm gonna rock this pregnancy. I'm gonna have this baby. And so last September, she gave birth to a beautiful baby boy, and she's finishing up her university degree, and she's a great mother.
Yeah, I mean, you hit on a really, really powerful point there, that point of empowerment. And you don't really hear about, you certainly hear about it from the other side, if you will. Oh, this abortion is women empowerment. But you're saying it's something completely different, that the empowerment comes from the dignity that you provide. I'd like both of you to share on that. Maybe I'll throw it over to you, Josie, when it comes to how would you respond that this type of attitude is empowerment of women?
Well, I love how Sister described that, that she provided support, but also reaffirmed that, you know, women are more powerful than, unfortunately, the pro-choice movement portrays them to be. And what I really don't like about the slogan, "My body, my choice," it makes it sound like the entire responsibility for pregnancy lies on the woman's shoulders. So if she chooses to give birth, then all of the responsibilities that come with that, she's going to have to take on herself, and that can be really intimidating, especially when it's a crisis pregnancy. And again, I acknowledge that 9 months, like pregnancy, can be very physically, emotionally, spiritually exhausting. I still think that is the correct option every woman should choose, but also I think that there's a responsibility that society has in aiding her through that pregnancy. I think that the phrase, "it takes a village to raise a child," it kind of downplays the role of the family, but there is some truth to it in the sense that there is a lot of work involved in child rearing, and this is such important work that our society really should be involved in supporting a woman from the moment that she finds out that she's pregnant until, you know, that child is full-grown adult, sort of thing.
Sister, I'll give you the last word on this. That moment must be very rewarding for you in your ministry when that heart all of a sudden, boom, goes from the fear of the future to empowerment that I can do this.
Yeah, and actually, yes, that is such a powerful moment for us when her heart turns towards life for herself and for her child. And that turn of the heart really involves, like you were saying, a village. It takes a village to raise a child. We have thousands of co-workers of life who are volunteers that join us in this life-saving mission. And when they experience that they have people around them that can give them housing, that can offer them a job, that can have childcare, that can bring meals to them after they give birth, all these fears, these practical ways that people can surround a woman and say, "We believe in you. You can do this, and we're going to walk with you every step of the way." And that's such a powerful gift to receive and to witness in the heart of every woman.
And isn't that the way, when we point our concerns, our fears, our future upwards, and we leave it in His hands, as opposed to trying to figure things out for ourselves in dealing with all of these things. So well put, Sister. We'll move on to the next, I guess, argument, if you will, the end the suffering argument. We hear so much about why don't we just end the suffering? And really, it's so much deeper than that. Alex, let's start with you on the other end of life, on euthanasia. When you hear that rationale, why don't we just end the suffering? Well, what is your response?
Okay, so suffering is a reality, and there's a lot of conditions that people go through which are very difficult, and that they want to escape that, and that's why, euthanasia is sold to them as a way to end suffering. So they're, I'm being accused of, I want people to suffer or something, which is, of course, the last thing I'm interested in. I'm not interested in anybody suffering. Then there's the other side of the issue of suffering. I'm going to deal with that quickly right now, which is the whole issue of the spiritual suffering. And a lot of people will suggest, we have to accept our sufferings, but that's a personal thing people have to be willing to do. And it has, and there is a reality that if we accept our sufferings, that is of how would you say, a strengthening benefit. And, it's an empowering thing if we can do that. But it's not easy, and that's an individual thing that people have to be willing or not willing to do. But the whole question of suffering, for the most part, is one that's being played on to create fear. So the euthanasia lobby goes on and on and on and on, and they have their stories, and they're constantly reiterating these stories of people who were suffering in order to promote euthanasia. So a lot of people who die by euthanasia or ask for euthanasia and get approved for euthanasia, it's not because they're actually suffering, it's because they have fear of suffering. And we see that in the data. So what's happening, like for instance in the Oregon data, because we can look at the state of Oregon, which has had assisted suicide for a very long time, the whole issue of suffering is like way down on the list why people have actually asked for assisted suicide, but their fear of future suffering is very high. So they've been made to fear what might happen rather than what's actually going on. And we can deal with suffering, but the biggest thing about suffering is how I care for you. You know, it's one thing to experience, human difficulty and to have a lot of supports and be able to get through that, because there's certainly medications or certainly things we can do to mitigate suffering in a medical sense, but also in a psychological, social, spiritual sense. There's great things we can do. Being with someone, helping them through that time is fundamental, okay? And because the reality we know is suffering alone. Now, suffering alone, for someone who actually is truly suffering alone is a very hard thing for the human person to go through. And you can see how they might lose hope and lose meaning and feel their life lacks value, purpose, and want to end it all when they're experiencing that. But when we have interconnectedness and we actually care for the person, we help them with their meaning and their purpose, then they want to live until they finally die, because they feel there's always one more thing left to do, and they can live through that.
And isn't that the true meaning of compassion, walking with, journeying with? I'm sure, Angelina, you've dealt with this rationale time and time again as the pro-death lobby has tried to infiltrate what's going on with the Delta Hospice Society and the suffering. Why are you against ending the suffering? What's your response?
Yeah, we need to recognize that palliative care is an expert medical discipline that recognizes all aspects of pain. It recognizes the physical, psychological, spiritual, and over the last 50 years has developed all kinds of programs, all kinds of protocols in which to deal with physical pain, expert pain management, psychological issues that arise, and spiritual issues. And we know that, the reasons why people are now choosing euthanasia is not because they're in physical pain. It's because of things like they don't want to be alone, there's loneliness, they don't want to be a burden, they're anxious, they're depressed. These are mental health issues. So are, these euthanasia activists suggesting now that we're just going to kill people who are in, a mental health crisis? And we say absolutely not. Palliative care is one of the ways that we can do tremendous amounts of good for people who are suffering psychologically, spiritually, and physically. And that's why, we're so adamant that we have the tools, and if we're not allowed to use the tools, that we're abdicating our responsibility to humanity.
There's a whole side of this too that we think about the other end of life, but it's not just the other end of life when it comes to elderly or seniors. It's now creeping into end the suffering of anyone.
That's right.
Who may be in a depressed state. They will argue their safeguards, but are we being too hyperbolic about this whole thing? Or is it really getting to that point where, it's not just affecting people who are seniors, but also people who may be depressed, young people?
Right.
Well,
that's exactly it, Kevin. So when the law was first legalized in 2016, it was sold to Canadians that would be for, people who are dying and end of life, and they said, they talked about the very few who would actually access the law, because it would be, an outlet for those very few cases, and in fact, it hasn't happened that way at all. There's been many, many deaths. And now in last year, we expanded the law, our country expanded the law through Bill C-7. Now we allow euthanasia for mental illness, and now they're discussing euthanasia for children, putting in your power of attorney, etc. But the biggest thing to me, Kevin, is this whole lie about what this is all about. Because when I'm talking to people, and now in the last few years, I've had the opportunity, sadly, to speak to quite a few people who had either been approved for euthanasia, or a wife or a close family member calling me because their husband or their whoever has been approved for euthanasia. And when we get down to talking about this, it's usually that this person has come so emotionally distraught by their situation. They're dealing with a difficult time. They are going through what you would call, I guess these are sort of like end of life issues, and they're trying to get away from their fears. And what they're coming to the point is they're saying, I have no more meaning. I have no feeling of hope. I've lost my purpose. And so this becomes really an existential question for them, where they feel that they have no reason to continue living. And when I look at that and I start talking to people, what is my goal then? Well, because this is a greater type of suffering, actually. It's a suffering of, I feel my life has no meaning or purpose, right? That's a totally different issue than physical suffering per se. And what I try and do is I'm talking to people about how to find those little meanings, those little purposes, those little goals that we can establish. if someone's actually going to die, I mean, if they're actually dying and on their trajectory of dying, and of course, some of these cases we're talking about now, of course, now they're not actually dying at all, but nonetheless, then you need a time to sort of come to grips with all these things in order to accept that natural death is truly a healing and closure for you, and that's the goal, and that's the better way.
It's that whole idea of finding something to live for. Angelina, you must come across this so often in hospice setting, where giving people that goal, that what can we live for, even if it's a day or a week or a month, that life is worth living for every moment that we're granted on this earth. How do you see that? How do you respond to that? Do you have an anecdote or something that comes to mind when you hear that what Alex was just speaking about?
Yeah, there's tremendous different reasons that people have to want to carry on and to live life to its fullest every day. People want to have reconciliation. There's business that they feel that they need to do before they say goodbye. And the most tragic thing is that there is a lot of anxiety and depression sometimes when people come to a hospice. But with the current laws, their worst day becomes their last day. And that is not something that, family members, people who care about other people, want for people to experience. And one of the most tragic things about this law now is that, a day that a person comes into a hospice, they can get killed. So the hospice movement is being destroyed, and it could very easily just become a revolving door of death. That is never what the hospice movement was set out to be. It was a place where you did not come to die. It was a place where you came to live to the fullest. So, that's the tragedy of what these laws do. And that's what we fight within palliative care by never accepting that euthanasia is part of our medical discipline.
We think about suffering as pain, but there is so many different kinds of suffering. There's the emotional, psychological, and I think, moving to the subject of abortion and the killing of innocent life in the womb, women who are experiencing an unplanned pregnancy, we have to be very concerned about all of the suffering involved. So when we say end the suffering, how does it come across to you, and how do you respond in a sincere and apologetic tone when it comes to, say, somebody in a crisis pregnancy who says, I just want to end my suffering. I just want to end it. I want to get on with my life. Josie.
I mean, sadly, I think that if you live long enough, all of us can personally relate to that desire, especially when you're in the midst of the worst of the suffering. It doesn't matter what option is presented to you, you'll take it if it means an out. So just as Alex said, just as Angelina said, nobody wants anyone else to suffer. And we should, again, as a society, do what we can to relieve suffering. Unfortunately, as Alex also acknowledged, suffering can be a reality. So with any pregnancy, I think it's difficult, let alone a crisis pregnancy that can involve physical, emotional, and spiritual suffering. So I completely understand a woman's desire to have an abortion, to relieve that suffering. Obviously, that desire is mistaken in thinking that abortion will actually relieve her pain. But I also understand if she wants to spare her child from what she'll perceive to be a hard life. The question we must come back to is, what is the proper response to suffering? And it's to kill the suffering and not the sufferer, which can also apply to the preborn child. So with a woman in a crisis pregnancy, if it's a crisis because she's in poverty or because she has an abusive husband, abortion is not actually going to solve those problems. A poor woman will still be poor after she has the abortion. She'll still have an abusive husband after she has the abortion. You're not actually addressing those root problems. Furthermore, we would never say that killing is a solution if she had a born child. So if she had a toddler and she was, in a an estate where she didn't have the financial resources to raise that child, we wouldn't say, oh, it's fine to kill your 2-year-old. So likewise, just as we wouldn't say it's okay to kill a born child, even if that parent is suffering, we can't say that it's okay to kill a preborn child, even if their parent is suffering. Ultimately, as pro-lifers, we believe that all human beings are equal, so a preborn child matters as much as a born child. So we would never say that it's okay to kill an innocent human being after birth because of suffering, and so likewise, we shouldn't say it's okay to kill a preborn child because of suffering, even though we, again, fully acknowledge the severity of a lot of these circumstances that women are facing.
And Sister, in the work that you do with the Sisters of Life, you see suffering even after an abortion and have to deal with the fallout of the suffering, of the emotional suffering in post-abortive circumstances. Can you speak to your experience in that regard with people who are suffering after an abortion?
Absolutely, yeah. We just have the incredible privilege of journeying with women who are seeking hope and healing after abortion. So many women have this veil over their hearts and their minds after they've had an abortion that they have committed the unforgivable sin. But that's completely a lie, and that's a false truth that the devil wants them to believe. And so we have the joy and the privilege of pulling back the veil and letting them experience God's healing and forgiveness. And so many of the women, hundreds of them that we've journeyed and accompanied with after abortion, they tell us the suffering, the emotional, the physical, the psychological, the spiritual suffering that they have experienced after abortion, that if they had a choice, if they could go back, that they would not have chosen abortion because the suffering after abortion was so great. And then as sisters, we have really, we feel like we're ambassadors of mercy, really walking with them towards hope and healing after that. But just going back to when a woman is pregnant and feeling the suffering and the fear of a child, an unexpected pregnancy, I think the greatest suffering is that in the heart of her, in the depths of her heart, she feels so alone. And just going back to what Alex was saying, and that really the response to this kind of suffering, the suffering of feeling so alone and feeling rejected, whether it's from her parents or the father of the baby or her friends, is love. That is the response, is love. And no matter how much suffering a person is going through, if they have love, they can do anything. And when you go through the suffering with people who love you, you will become richer, more compassionate to others. Your life has more meaning and more purpose because you didn't get rid of suffering, you passed through it and you become more human, and the greatness of your love really shines and radiates to the world. I've heard people say, okay, we have 4 able-bodied people up here, healthy people speaking, and what we're speaking about are really, really difficult circumstances on either end of life. Yet you, with the Sisters of Life and the sisters who work with you, and your volunteer of thousands of your network of volunteers across the country, you journey with these people, not just at the time of their crisis, but sometimes days, months, weeks, years after. Can you speak to that? Yeah. Because I think that's something that we don't hear enough about. They say, oh, you just care about the baby, you just care about the person at that moment, and you don't care about it after. Is that the case? Not at all. Yeah, when a woman calls us, she becomes part of our family. And with family, you're with each other for the rest of your life. And so every year we have parties, Christmas parties, birthday parties, Mother's Day parties for women whose children are now 15, 16, 17 years old. And they, when you become part of our family, you're family for life. And so we're with them every step of the way. Alex, you must, and Angelina, as far as euthanasia and in a hospice setting, you must experience that too, that these relationships, that moving through the suffering, as Sister was talking about, really becomes pivotal in that whole dignity question, the dignity of the person.
Yeah, and when I look at this, I really think of the term abandonment really coming home, because when we're talking about killing somebody, and that's what it is, really what we're doing is we're abandoning them to death. We're not caring for them at all. And they're being sold this concept of, oh, well, this is our cultural care, like it's a caring thing to kill someone, which is really turning things upside down. True care is really to be with someone, to help them through their time. You know, and the Delta Hospice Society is a prime example. They were doing that and not willing to kill. And because they weren't willing to kill, the government and euthanasia lobby went after them. You know, and this is the reality. It was all and really what we were doing is we're trying to provide options. We're trying to help people. We're trying to make sure people have a feeling that life is worth living until the natural end. And in the end, the other side really, they say they're about freedom, and really it's about abandonment to death. That's what it's about, abandonment.
Angelina?
Yeah, I agree. You know, there is, to be able to walk with others during their most difficult times is truly who we are, who we should aspire to be as human beings. It is really far easier to just, you know, abdicate that responsibility completely and think that, you know, you're being a good person. You are nothing but a coward when that is your decision to just say, just kill people. It's easier. I know for the government it's certainly cheaper. It is honestly the most important thing you can do is to walk with another individual during their last days, to give them love, to give them hope, to give them compassion. That is what humanity is. And that is what we have very proudly and with complete sacrifice have done, and we will continue to do, because that is what it is, to actually love your neighbor.
I loved what you said there about true humanity, about the whole idea of being compassionate towards each other. That is the heart of humanity. Journeying with, being with, loving, as you spoke so well about, Alex. And when we look at the theme for this year's March for Life, the reason why we're here doing this program today is anticipation of the March for Life, the National March for Life. And the theme this year is I Am, which speaks volumes in so many different settings, but of course has its heart in the great I Am, the one who gave us the dignity, who shared his dignity with us as humans. I am worthy. I am worthy of assistance. I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Has so many connotations, so many biblical connotations, and that whole idea of the dignity of the person. Sister Antoniana, I am. How does that speak to you in your ministry, I am, when you hear those words?
When I hear the words I am, it brings me right back to Scripture. Brings me back to Jesus, who says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And then when we think of our own dignity, our dignity rests in the fact that we are made in God's image and likeness. And so every human person, when we have a heartbeat, that means, oftentimes when I give talks to people, I ask them to check their pulse. And every beat of their heart is God saying, I love you, I love you, I love you. And it's the fact that we exist gives us our dignity, not for what we can do, what we have, or anything like that. It's the fact that we are alive. That gives us the sacredness of our life.
Yeah, Josie, when we were speaking about this whole subject of I am today, you said it was kind of the contradiction was the I do mentality. It's about what I can do. It's not about who I am. Can you speak more to that?
Certainly. So I think a lot of abortion advocates, they root this concept of personhood and legal rights in our capabilities. And you have to be able to do certain things to qualify for personhood and to qualify for legal protection. And the pro-life philosophy is completely opposite of that. So we have a speaker at this year's Youth Summit, Emily Albrecht from the Equal Rights Institute, and their main mission is to popularize the equal rights argument. And essentially they ask, are we all equal? So looking at all the panelists here, we differ in age, we differ in sex, in race. We certainly will differ in abilities. And that's, I think, true of anyone, anywhere you look at on the streets, you'll see people from all sorts of different backgrounds, all sorts of different skills and levels of ability. Nonetheless, most of us believe that we're all equal, all equally deserving of human rights. So the follow-up question is why? Why are we all equal, especially when we're all so different? Presumably there's some quality that we all share in common, that we all hold equally to justify this belief in human equality. And that quality is our humanity. Our humanness is categorical. You can't be 50% human or 75% human. If you are a human being, you're as human as everyone else. So that really is the source of human equality. It's the source of our value. So it's not to say that these abilities that we have to communicate, to reason, consciousness, all of these traits that pro-choice philosophers will mention, of course those are valuable, but they're not the source of our value. Because we're human beings, we can do all of these lovely things. But because of that humanity, it's connected, biblically to the idea that we're made in the image and likeness of God, of course. But even secular people can understand that concept of human dignity. And that's what really I Am is getting at, as Sister Antoniana was talking about. It's not about what you can do. You don't have to earn your value or earn legal protection. You should just receive that same respect. You should receive human rights because of who and what you are, which is a human being. And then as Christians, we know that as a human being, we have all of that dignity and because of our Creator. So I think really, again, it's shifting the idea of value away from our abilities, our level of development, because that's going to vary from person to person. It's going to vary throughout our own lifetimes. That doesn't mean our value changes too. It doesn't mean that some people are more valuable than others, because it really just comes back to our humanity. And if you don't understand that human rights have to apply to all human beings, then you're not subscribing to the concept of human rights anymore, and it really just comes back to this philosophy of might makes right, which I think we want to reject.
Human rights. Angelina, is that what you're fighting for, human rights, in your work with Delta Hospice?
Yeah, when this started, when I started to be involved with the Delta Hospice Society, I came in as a patient. I came as a cancer patient, and then became a cancer survivor. And I wanted to do good. I wanted to give back. And somewhere along the line, the whole world changed. And the work that we wanted to do was considered to be unacceptable. We went from being helpers, volunteers, to this moment where we're thrown onto the front lines of a war against humanity, and we have become warriors. We have not surrendered. And we end up being part of, the greatest human rights movement of all time. So what we were just people, naive people, and what we have become is people that will stand and not surrender and fight for the sanctity of life.
Alex, is I Am, the fight for the dignity of the human person, the greatest battle that we're facing these days? What does I Am say to you in that regard?
I think that Angelina is absolutely correct, and I go one step into this saying also, it's also about human equality, because Peter Singer, who sadly is possibly the world's most prominent philosopher of our day, he would define your humanness based on your cognitive ability or your abilities, as was referred to by Josie, and so therefore I see that point of view as very discriminatory, because it's saying you're only human if you have these abilities. If you don't have these abilities, then you're not human. You're not a person, you're not human, you're not worth protecting, and we can end your life because it's okay. And so then the whole concept of human equality is fundamental. So the issue of euthanasia, I actually, it really hit home to me many years ago when I was much younger, with the whole Tracy Latimer issue. Tracy Latimer was 11 years old, had significant cerebral palsy, and her dad killed her in the cab of his truck by gassing her to death. And then he said that this was a situation where he had to do this. But Tracy's human equality meant that she was worth protecting. She was worth caring for. She was worth treating with human equality in the same way as all people, either with disabilities or abilities, whether they be elderly, young, unborn. It doesn't matter. We're all equal. We have human equality. We have human dignity. And by treating us that way, then suddenly all of us are in the same spectrum together, whether we're wealthy or poor, whether we're filmmakers or just euthanasia opposers. It doesn't matter. We're equal and we have importance. And I think that's fundamental.
Yeah, but what really drives me crazy about that situation of Latimer is in those days we put him behind bars for what he did, and now in some cases he's being hailed as a champion.
Right.
And so how do you make sense of that?
That's what actually got me involved, because yes, he was being convicted, and yes, it went to the Supreme Court and he upheld the conviction for killing his daughter. But at the same time, there were several polls that had been done at that time which said that more than 1/3 of Canadians thought that what Robert Latimer did was just fine, and that he should just be released and he should be treated as if he did the right thing. And there was, if more than 1/3 of Canadians thought that killing your disabled daughter was the right thing to do, then I knew we had a problem. That's a serious problem. And a lot of people would say, well, we're not really like that. And if you think about it, it's difficult to understand, but we have to look at history, what's happened in the past and what we're doing today, and realize that we're repeating history, maybe in a little different way, but we're still repeating history because we've determined that certain lives are not worth living. We've determined that it's okay for a doctor to decide to end a certain life. That's okay. Or a nurse practitioner or a nurse to end a certain life. And that's okay. And we've set up rules for doing that. Well, that means that, first of all, we've given a lack of equality, but we've given power to someone to kill you. We've abandoned you to death. And on top of it, there's certain classes of people who obviously fall into that category far easier than others. And so we've created a situation of human inequality rather than human equality. We've taken away the dignity of a human person because we said it's okay to kill you.
Society certainly continues to spiral out of control when it comes to these life issues, and you spoke so well there, Alex. I'd like to speak to that whole idea of where are we headed? Where are we going with both of these issues? These laws, these lack of laws in the case of abortion. Maybe we'll start with Angelina this time. You're dealing with these laws every single day. You're dealing with the pro-death society, the pro-death movement coming at you, not in a silent way, but in a very vocal way. What do you see for the future, and what needs to be done with regards to protecting the lives of the vulnerable?
I think that we can see the writing on the wall in terms of, this political movement called medical assistance in dying, euthanasia, which is what it is. The writing on the wall is that there is a coercive makeover happening of what we have known to be called palliative care. They're trying to push euthanasia into some very sacred spaces here. And will they be successful? By all indications, it seems to me that they will. What people need to understand is that euthanasia has no place in palliative care. In fact, it's the antithesis of what this 50-year medical discipline has always tried to do. So, what I say is that we have to recognize that they're going to be trying to push euthanasia into every hospice and palliative care facility in this country. In British Columbia alone, there's maybe a handful of places left that will not kill their patients. This is a contagion that will continue to drift across this entire country. The Delta Hospice Society has refused to surrender, and we stand every day and we speak about the importance of protecting palliative care. What we're going to need to do is we're going to need to provide hospice sanctuary to the people in this country. And we want to be a pioneer in terms of, seeing that go forward. It's going to have to be done privately, I also suspect, through private organizations like the Delta Hospice Society, setting up facilities across this country, partnering with people in communities to provide places, safe places for the dying that will not be subjected to euthanasia, that will not be pressured, the most sick and vulnerable, to kill themselves or to be killed, honestly. And that is going to be a tremendous endeavor. But people need to understand that is the future, and that is what we're going to have to do. We're prepared to be leaders in that regard. Well, we will show you what it looks like to build a hospice by yourself, to fundraise, to protect the most vulnerable among us. But hospice sanctuary is the movement that needs to be created in this country. And so that's what we talk about every day now. Forget about the government, forget about government money. We're never going to get government money to do that. So it's going to have to be ordinary people, populist grassroots movement for hospice sanctuary across Canada.
Alex, what Angelina's speaking about here, I mean, you've been ringing the alarm bells for many, many years now about finding sanctuary for people who want to live to their natural end. Is what's happening in BC something we should be concerned about right across the country?
Absolutely, because I'll give you an example. We got a call from a woman whose husband was asking for euthanasia, and she was shocked that her husband, who had a faith values, and she just couldn't understand where this was coming from. Why was her husband asking for euthanasia? And then so we discussed it, and how do you empower someone and help someone? Becomes my question. How do I help them? What do I say? Because is there like a silver bullet that will suddenly change her husband's mind? And of course, my point of view was explaining to her, well, she has a relationship with her husband. She is close to her husband. She has to then be with him in order to bring him from where he's at right now to the final point where he says, no, actually, I'd like to live until I die naturally. And these are the kind of things you're doing. You're working with people. And as Angelina's talking about, there has to be people right across Canada committed to the concept of hospice sanctuary, because that's not going to be paid for by the government. In fact, this man was in a hospice, the one husband who had been asking for euthanasia. And it was actually, in the end, it was one of the nurses in the middle of the night who spoke to him to help convince him that maybe this was the best idea for him. And this is the kind of thing that goes on when people are going through their vulnerabilities. But in our own country, what's going on right now is so we passed this Bill C-7 last year, which expanded euthanasia. And now we've got a government committee that's been established, and it's been given a fast timeline. So by June 23rd, it has to have a report out. So how much time are they actually going to seek true information? And they're looking at what? Child euthanasia. They're looking at euthanasia in your that you could put in your advance directive. So you say in your advance directive, I'd like to have euthanasia if I become incompetent in some way. Now, the crazy thing about that is that when you become incompetent, what happens? You lose your right to say no, because the law says that, if you're incompetent, then we have to follow what your advance directive says. So let's say you've changed your mind. You have no right to change your mind if we put it in your advance directive. These are the kind of things they're talking about now. Euthanasia for people with mental illness. Well, that's already been passed in law. So now it's just implementing. And these are the directions they're going. But the one other thing that affects things is the whole thing of hospice sanctuary. The euthanasia lobby right now has started a campaign. They're going after denominational hospitals and denominational nursing homes, etc., and hospices, saying that they're using this concept that there should be a right that you not be transferred. So they're saying the problem is that we're forcing people to have to be transferred. So what's happening is, so let's say Kevin's in a Catholic hospital and he asks for euthanasia. Well, the Catholic hospital won't do it, so then he has to request a transfer, so that he gets transferred then to the non-Catholic hospital where they would kill him. Well, they're saying that this problem of transfer, that's denying someone's rights. You have to transfer. So what they're actually saying is the denominational healthcare institutions will have to do the act, because the transfer is this terrible thing. And so they're actually trying to force it to one step further. They're trying to force it on people who want nothing to do with it. That's the big thing. And why are they doing that? Because they don't want anyone to have the right to say in the end that it's wrong to kill.
We're going to get to the hopeful part of this. I want to assure viewers that we are going to get to the hopeful part of this.
I think hospice sanctuary is hopeful, but I know what you're saying. But
definitely, hospice sanctuary.
But there's a reality of what's going on today. Yes.
Absolutely. So we will get to that, but we got to get to where we're headed, because it's not a good situation. People often will call me or email me, is it really as bad as they say in Canada? And I have to say, yes, it is. We need to step up to the plate, and we will get to that. But before we do, I'd like to throw it over to Josie to speak about what's on the horizon with regards to life issues on the side of abortion and abortion rights, if you will.
Well, Kevin, I want to talk about two things. The first is that there is a transition from surgical abortions to chemical abortions that the pro-life movement is challenged to respond to. So the latest figure I've seen is that 1/3 of abortions in Canada now are chemical abortions. And that's, I think, going to increase. In the States, it's already over 50%. And that is in large part due to the pandemic. But we'll also see with Roe v. Wade, as states start to restrict abortion, a lot of abortions are going to become chemical there. And then here in Canada, there's a huge push to increase abortion access through chemical abortions. So those are going to happen earlier in pregnancy. You'll have fewer women actually going to hospitals or private abortion facilities to get an abortion, but they'll have the abortion in their home. The converse of that is that we can offer the abortion pill reversal process. So if a woman takes the first pill before she takes the second, there is still a chance of being able to save that child's life. So I think the pro-life movement really needs to try to get there at that last moment and intervene on behalf of that child's life. But because of these changes, I think the pro-life movement really needs to look at how it does activism and how to respond to this different form of abortion. And then the second thing I want to talk about is the Trudeau government is going after crisis pregnancy centers who provide life-saving care to the mother and the child, as Sister Antoniana has described. So these centers actually provide real choice to women who want to give birth and just need assistance to do so. So unfortunately, the Trudeau government has accused crisis pregnancy centers of dishonest counseling, and they want to strip these centers of their charitable status, and any pro-life charity of their charitable status. So I would really encourage everyone to be able to contact their MPs to ask them to stop this plan, and especially their pro-choice MPs, because again, this is about real choice. If an MP is saying, you know what, actually we don't want crisis pregnancy centers to exist, we want them to close their doors, then they're not a pro-choice politician, they're a pro-abortion politician, and they should be revealed to be that.
Sister, like all of our other panelists here, they're not just speaking about it, they're living it every day. And you are living it every day. You're taking it into the present with every phone call, with every email, with every person you encounter. What do you see? Do you see trends? Do you see things happening? Do you see there's a new that we need a new way of looking at things when it comes to the future? What are your thoughts on that? Or is it just about the present?
It's many things, but I think at the heart of it, at least for us as Sisters of Life, is that this movement is really a spiritual battle. And so as Sisters of Life, we are contemplative active. So we spend half of our day in prayer because we know that the demon of the culture of death can only be cast out by prayer and fasting, which is what our founder would say. And then from that prayer then flows everything else. And recognizing that every human person desires so much to live, to give life, to thrive, to be happy. And how do they do that? They need to be surrounded by a community of love and support. And so thinking about crisis pregnancy centers, as you were saying, that the government is thinking about revoking their charitable status, that's literally like a death sentence for so many, because the crisis pregnancy centers and the resources that we offer to women really open up a horizon that say, you are not alone. You can do this. We believe in you. You can give life both to yourself and to your child. And yeah, it's so important. And I think the hope that we have is that life will always triumph in the end, and that the Lord is the Lord of life, so that no matter how dark the future looks, and it's pretty dark as we're talking about it, that in the end, the victory has been won. And so we stake our hope in that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. And that's what we can proclaim to all those who come to us for support and who are in distress.
And what a perfect segue into our final segment, which is about hope. You know, the good book says we should always be prepared. We should always be ready to give a reason for our hope. And I'm wondering what our panelists have to say. What is your reason for hope? Perhaps we'll start with you, Alex.
Well, actually, I think the Delta Hospice Society has shown us why we should have hope. We have to stand strong, and we have to continue. So the fact of it is that silence is not an option for us in this culture, and it's not all bad. It looks all bad, well, because obviously politically things seem to have come together in a bad sort of mess right now. But nonetheless, we can continue. You mentioned about crisis pregnancy centers, and the government wants to take away their charitable numbers. Well, there's no reason for those crisis pregnancy centers to stop their work because they're not going to have a charitable number. It's going to be a challenge to them, but they need to continue. They need to believe that what they're doing is right. In our work, we're dealing with people all the time, so there's also that one-on-one hope. You know, every time there's someone who you're helping out, you're making a difference. So I may not be able to change, as I say, the world, but I can help someone's life. I can make a difference in somebody's life, and that transfers to a whole cultural paradigm. But I recognize that we ourselves have to change. And I look at myself and I realize, okay, well, you know, but we all have to change though. We all have to change. We have to recognize that we have to become the cultural undoing. We have to be the example of why the culture needs to change. And so, you know, you're not selling just life, you're actually selling the reason for life. We believe for a reason. You know, and I always talk about this whole issue of life as having meaning. You know, meaning, purpose, we have direction, there's a purpose for it. You know, I'm caring for somebody because they're a human being. They have meaning. That's why I do it. There's no other reason. It's not about Alex. If it were about Alex, this would have been done many years ago. I would have, you know, closed up shop and said goodbye. We did our thing and it's over. But it wasn't about Alex. So the other thing is working with others, you know, and helping others do the same thing. They have to recognize more and more the importance of the other in whatever way we can. And the reason for that is, of course, that is so culturally, how would you say, it's the opposite of where the culture is. The culture is about me, and I'm not saying Alex. The culture is all about me. It's about self-centeredness. That's where the culture is. And you want to be countercultural, is what we're saying. We want to change things. We want it to be a culture of life. But then we have to flip it upside down and be a culture of life. And that's a challenge. And it's pain involved in that. And Angelina knows that. And we all know that because we've seen the fact that to stand up is not easy and to do that, yes.
Yeah, and we'll throw it to you then, Angelina, because you have been doing this every day, putting others first. I'm sure this is not something you ever dreamed that you would be doing. What is the reason for your hope?
You know, 2 years ago, this started for us. Our little society, we had 400 members. The government came to us and they said, you have to start killing your patients. And we refused. So they all came against us. The mayor, the provincial government, both of the MLAs in our area where we live, the federal government. They took our hospice from us. They literally expropriated $9 million because we refused to kill our patients. A national lobby came against us, Dying with Dignity Canada. Local activists came against us. I was personally doxxed. I have been and continue to be. But you know what? Pro-life nation rose and came to our defense. We now have 14,000 members in our society. We are now a national organization. It doesn't matter what they say or what they do, because we know that God is with us and we will continue. We have great plans. I sit here today in this little office. It's, I don't even think it's probably 200 square feet. That's because they stole a 7,500 square foot building from us. But I can tell you with all honesty, I sit here today with more hope and more joy and more love in my heart than I ever have, because no one will stop us. We are relentless when it comes to fighting for the sanctity of life. We have seen what the people in this nation will do, how they will rise, and they will come to not only our defense, but for the defense of life. So I want to give everybody the truth when I tell you from the bottom of my heart, I have more hope now that we will change the world than I did 2 years ago. So thank you very much for having me here today.
It's been a blessing, and that hope is instilled in the work that you do at Campaign Life Coalition. Josie, what is the reason for your hope in the mess that is Canada right now?
My answer is going to be very predictable, but it's Jesus Christ. To provide an example, I think a lot of pro-lifers are really encouraged by the possibility of overturning Roe v. Wade south of the border come June. Certainly, I'm hopeful for that outcome. I'm hopeful that if Roe v. Wade is overturned, then we'll have a ripple effect here in Canada, and that will reignite the abortion debate here. But I also have to be realistic. And if Roe v. Wade isn't overturned, our work is the same. We have to continue regardless. We can't place our hope in man. I think the day that abortion was decriminalized in 1969 here in Canada is often referred to as the day of infamy. The real day of infamy was back when Adam and Eve chose their own will instead of God. So this battle between the culture of life and the culture of death, between good and evil, light and darkness, it's been going on for millennia. We have the privilege of doing this work today. The current iterations of this evil are abortion and euthanasia. And again, we must do our best to fight them. But we ourselves personally, we can't abolish sin altogether. So we just need to, as Sister Antoniana was talking about, to pray and to fast and every single day to recommit to doing God's will and to take solace in Easter and knowing that life is victorious. And so that's really what motivates me, because I think, just honestly speaking, Canada is probably one of the worst countries when it comes to life issues, so it can be really discouraging here. But our mission is the same as pro-lifers, no matter where you are in Canada. You just keep at it day by day. Jim Hughes, the President Emeritus of Campaign Life Coalition, that's what he did for decades. He's still doing today. And so, I take inspiration from pro-lifers like him who just, they don't necessarily always look at the big picture and start, being very anxious about how are we going to change all of these things. They just, look at what's at your feet, look at what's in front of you, and try to do your best that day.
We know who wins. We know who wins. Sister, I'm gonna put you on the spot here to maybe end with a story of hope. Do you have a story that you deal day in, day out with stories of the lowest changed to the height of joy, happiness, and empowerment? Give us a reason for our hope.
Oh, there's so many reasons to hope, actually. And I think of so many stories, but one in particular, I'd like to go on the other end of life for the women that we journey with who have suffered after abortion. There's so many reasons of hope that God's mercy endures forever. So we host these days of prayer and healing for women who are journeying after abortion. And one of the women had suffered 60 years ago, but would go to Mass every Sunday and not receive Holy Communion and really feel like the Lord could not forgive her. But on this day of prayer and healing, she had the grace and the courage to go to confession for the first time. And that evening, she received Holy Communion. And she said to us, she felt like she was young again and that she could dance. And after her abortion, she felt like she was caught in a net. And every time she moved, it was darker and darker. But that day, the net was gone and she felt free for the first time in 60 years. And we know that that's it. Like, the hope is that no matter how dark the darkness is, there is always light. If we just turn our eyes to the Lord, who is our hope, in the Eucharist, in the sacraments, in confession, in the Mass, it's like He is our Lord, and He will be victorious. He is victorious. And so that's just such a joy for our hearts, literally watching the dead come to life again. And that's the greatest hope in our lives.
Well, we pray one day, and through the work of all of our panelists and you at home who are on fire, that this net of death, this net of depression, of abandonment, will drop. And that we will all dance one day for joy because we are upholding the value of life from conception until natural death. Angelina, Ireland, in Delta Hospice Society, thank you so much for joining us. What a blessing it's been to have you with us today. And thanks to Todd, your cameraman out there too.
Thank you very much.
And Josie, thank you. God bless your work at Campaign Life Coalition. Good luck this week at the Youth Summit and at the March for Life. Everything that you're doing, God bless you and your work.
Thanks, Kevin.
Alex Schattenberg, you've been at it for a long, long time with the Euthanasia Prevention Coalition, and you're looking pretty good, I might say, too. So
Very kind. Yeah, very
so
kind.
thanks for joining us, and God bless everyone at Euthanasia Prevention Coalition for your work. And Sister Antoniana, I've gotten to know you and the Sisters of Life a little deeper, a little more this year by the work that you do, and a feature that you're going to see as part of the March for Life programming. Incredible work. Rest assured of all of our prayers for the work that you do and your network across Canada who assist you in assisting women with crisis pregnancy. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
And to all of you watching at home, we hope this presentation has not only enlightened you, but given you hope for the future. I am fearfully and wonderfully made, and so are you. My name is Kevin Dunn. God bless you, and thanks for joining us.
Welcome back, everyone. Once again, my name is Josie.
And I'm Matt, and we are from Campion Life Coalition and members of the National Organizing Committee for the March for Life.
I really hope that you enjoyed that conversation and were able to learn something that you're able to pass on to friends and family members. Because if we're going to be able to do anything about abortion and euthanasia, we have to be willing to have these tough conversations with people who might disagree with us. And so I hope that you were able to learn from that presentation that you're able to do so in a loving and compassionate way. I also want to tell you to tune in for our next Life on Film segment in November. I interview a very special guest and we have a really interesting discussion. So I'm not going to tell you who that special guest is yet, but please do keep an eye out for your email or YouTube notification about that Life on Film segment.
So before we sign off for the night, make sure to save the date for May the 11th, 2023. That is the date of the National March for Life next year. And now is also the time to talk about the March for Life in your church community, in your school, in your workplace. Look into organizing buses, finding accommodation. If you have any questions about the National March for Life and all the surrounding events like the Rose Dinner, the Youth Conference, and whatnot, just go to marchforlife.ca and or call us or email us at the information that we will make sure to include below in the description. So I guess that's a wrap for tonight. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and we will see you back in a few weeks for the next Life on Film.